Thanks for joining me for another reading through the Bible in chronological order. Today we're in Judges chapter 1 and 2. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, "Who will be the first to fight for us against the Canaanites?" The Lord answered, "Judah is to go. I have handed the land over to him." So Judah said to his brother Simeon, "Come with me to my allotted territory and let's fight against the Canaanites. I will also go with you to your allotted territory." So Simeon went with him. When Judah attacked, the Lord handed the Canaanites and the Perizzites over to them. They struck down 10,000 men in Bezek. They found Adonai Bezek and Bezek, fought against him, and struck down the Canaanites and Perizzites. When Adonai Bezek fled, they pursued him, caught him, and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Adonai Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. God has repaid me for what I have done. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. The men of Judah fought against Jerusalem, captured it, and put it to the sword, and set the city on fire. Afterward, the men of Judah marched down to the fight against the Canaanites who were living in the hill country, the Negev, and the Judean foothills. Judah also marched against the Canaanites who were living in Hebron. Hebron was formerly named Kiriath Arba, and they struck down Shisha, Ahiman, Talmai. From there, they marched against the residents of Debir. Debir was formerly called Kiriath Sephir. Caleb said, "Whoever attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir, I will give my daughter Aksha to him as wife." So Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's youngest brother, captured it, and Caleb gave his daughter Aksha to him as his wife. When she arrived, she persuaded Othniel to ask her father for a field. As she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, "What do you want?" She answered him, "Give me a blessing. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me springs also." So Caleb gave her both the upper and lower springs. The descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, had gone up with the man of Judah from the city of palms to the wilderness of Judah, which was in the Negev of Arid, and they went to live among the people. Judah went with his brother Simeon and struck the Canaanites who were living in Zephath. And completely destroyed the town. So they named the town Hormah. And Judah captured Gaza and its territory, Ashkelon and its territory, and Ekron and its territory. The Lord was with Judah and enabled them to take possession of the hill country, but they could not drive out the people who were living in the plain because those people had iron chariots. So Judah gave Hebron to Caleb, just as Moses had promised. And then Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak who lived there. At the same time, the Benjaminites did not drive out the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. The Jebusites have lived among the Benjamites in Jerusalem to this day. The house of Joseph has also attacked Bethel, and the Lord was with them. They sent spies to Bethel. The town was formerly named Luz. And the spy saw a man coming out of the town and said to him, "Please show us how to get into town, and we will show you kindness." When he showed them the way into the town, they put the town to the sword, but released the man and his entire family. And the men went to the land of the Hittites, built a town, and named it Luz. That is its name still today. At that time, Manasseh failed to take possession of Bethshean and Tanakh and their surrounding villages, or the residents of Dor, Ibleam, and Megiddo and their surrounding villages. The Canaanites were determined to stay in this land. When Israel became stronger, they made the Canaanites serve as forced labor, but never drove them out completely. At that time, Ephraim failed to drive out the Canaanites who were living in Gezer, so the Canaanites have lived among them in Gezer. Zebulun failed to drive out the residents of Kitron, or the residents of Nahalal, so the Canaanites lived among them and served as forced labor. Asher failed to drive out the residents of Akko and Sidon and Alab, Akzib, Helbah, Aphnik, Rehob. The Asherites lived among the Canaanites who were living in the land because they failed to drive them out. Naphtali did not drive out the residents of Bethshemesh or the residents of Beth-Anath. They lived among the Canaanites who were living in the land, but the residents of Bethshemesh and Beth-Anath served as their forced labor. The Amorites forced the Danites into the hill country and did not allow them to go down into the valley. The Amorites were determined to stay in Har-Haras, Ajalon, and Shalabim. When the house of Joseph got the upper hand, the Amorites were made to serve as forced labor. The territory of the Amorites extended from the Scorpion's Ascent, that is, from Selah upward. Joshua 2. And the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I have brought you out of Egypt and led you into the land I had promised to your ancestors. I also said, I will never break my covenant with you. You are not to make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You are to tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed me. What have you done? Therefore I now say, I will not drive out these people before you. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a trap for you. When the angel of the Lord had spoken these words to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly. So they named that place Bochim and offered sacrifices there to the Lord. Previously, when Joshua had sent the people away, the Israelites had gone to take possession of the land, each to his own inheritance. The people worshiped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and during the lifetimes of the elders who outlived Joshua. They had seen all the Lord's great works he had done. And Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. They buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. That whole generation was also gathered to their ancestors. After them, another generation rose up who did not know the Lord or the works he had done for Israel. The Israelites did what was evil in the Lord's sight. They worshipped the Baals and abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed other gods from the surrounding peoples and bowed down to them. They angered the Lord, for they abandoned him and worshipped Baal and the Ashtoreths. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he handed them over to marauders who raided them. He sold them to the enemies around them, and they could no longer resist enemies. Whenever the Israelites went out, the Lord was against them, and they brought disaster, just as he had promised and sworn to them. So they suffered greatly. And the Lord raised up judges who saved them from the power of their marauders, but they did not listen to their judges. Instead, they prostituted themselves with other gods, bowing down to them. They quickly turned from the way of their ancestors who had walked in obedience to the Lord's commands, and they did not do as their ancestors did. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for the Israelites, the Lord was with him and saved the people from the power of their enemies while the judge was still alive. The Lord was moved to pity whenever they groaned because of those who were oppressing and afflicting them. Whenever the judge died, the Israelites would act even more corruptly than their ancestors, following other gods to serve them and bow in worship to them. And they did not return from their evil practices or their obstinate ways. And the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he declared, because this nation has violated my covenant that I made with their ancestors and disobeyed me, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. I did this to test Israel and to see whether or not they would keep the Lord's way by walking in it as their ancestors had. The Lord left these nations and did not drive them out immediately, and he did not hand them over to Joshua. So the introduction to Judges is pretty bleak. It sets the pattern of sin and judgment that will actually follow throughout the book, and we'll notice that especially as we get started into that on our next reading. But it is significant that what God did is his self-acknowledgement to test Israel, to give them the land and to offer them the land, but they had to follow through with what God needed them to so that they would receive all of the land, that is, all of the potential land. But as chapter 1 noted, many of the tribes were just content to let the people live among them. And that will become the falling, the cause of falling for the nation in their future. What a lesson to learn, that in generations they will suffer the pangs of this generation's weakness because they would not do the will of God. Thanks for joining me, and join me again for tomorrow for another reading through the Bible in chronological order.